2021 GMs with the DFM system for direct fuel management. Now the DFM system, I am very well aware of how it functions because I'm very familiar with the AFM systems. However, this is the first DFM version of the engines that I have actually had in my shop, so I was excited to work on it when I got it. I did do a live stream on this truck, so if you want to see my actual process live, if you're more of a person to see it that way, of course, just go to my live streams and search for this video. You'll be able to find it. Otherwise, I'll throw a link up in the corner wherever at some point randomly throughout the video. But we're going to jump right into the meat and potatoes of how you discover what's wrong with this particular scenario. This is what's actually called a spun lifter from a bad plastic guide. There's a guide inside these units that fails, and when it does, the lifter can spin. Now this could happen to all 16 of the lifters in this vehicle. Any one of them could do this. The previous generation, it could happen to 8. So it's got twice as many potential for this failure, and I expect it to be a very, very common failure on these DFM V8 engines from GM. So with that, we're going to hop right into basically the diagnosis of it, of how to do it, how to see it, right out the gate. While I'm at this position, it's sat overnight since the live stream that I did, I want to look at the rocker movement. So typically what I've been telling people is with a spun lifter, make sure the engine, when you crank it over, you jump the starter relay and you crank it over to see the rocker move on the suspected lifter. And you want to watch the rocker movement. Now, what I tell people is anywhere from 5 to 7 times the rocker movement. If it doesn't stop by then, it's probably good. I think I need to update that to a little bit higher amount. Either keep the same amount and tell them to do it 2 or 3 times consecutively, or tell them to just hold the starter longer. I'd probably want to tell them to do it 2 or 3 times consecutively. I'll see how I feel about it after this one. But my concern is that 5 or 7 times isn't enough to actually diagnose or see it, especially on these engines. There's a lot more going on with the oiling system on these, as far as where the oil volume has to fill up. And so I'm concerned that 5 to 7 rocks of the rocker isn't enough to get enough oil pressure. So since it sat overnight, I'm going to bring you guys around and we're going to take a look at that rocker and see when it quits moving. That is the indicator of a spun lifter, and it's because of the way the oiling system is designed. So these AFM lifters, when applied oil pressure, they activate, which stops the operation of the valve. That way that cylinder just becomes a air spring, more or less, and the valves are no longer functioning. So if the lifter rotates 180 degrees, there's a main oil galley on that other side of the lifter. So when it rotates, the AFM side of the lifter now gets fed oil pressure whenever the engine has oil pressure. And that is what I believe has happened here, because if it was anything else, like say a bad solenoid for example, it would stop both rockers from moving, not just the intake rocker like it's doing on this one. When it comes to jumping these things to make them crank over, it is a little different than the previous generation. The previous generation, fuse box is over there, and it's only 1 relay you can get that starter motor to crank over. This one requires doing 2 relays on this particular model. Now there's a couple different variations of these trucks, but I think all the AFM/DFM, this is DFM, which is direct fuel management, I think all the direct fuel management engines are going to be this dual relay design, though admittedly this is my first ones I finally got my hands on, and that's why I'm so excited to work on it. So we have 2 relays. One is a small one is a bigger one, and the pins 87 and 30 on these are the ones that you need to jump, but you have to do them in order. So we have 2 relays, one of which, this guy here, the bigger one, and that one, you can hear is just spinning the motor. This one here engages the starter. So you need to engage the starter and spin the motor in order to get it to turn over. So it's kind of a dual thing versus the previous generation, which was just, I could do this and it would turn over. Much easier on the previous generation. Now, let's get you guys a view of those rocker arms. What we're watching is this and this rocker arm. So these first 2 rocker arms here are the ones that we need to look at. And it's specifically this one that I believe is the intake, because the intake port goes right to it. This is the one that's actually failed. We're going to watch how many times this has to rock before it stops rocking, since it has sat overnight plus a couple of hours. So let's see what happens. Here's a compression gauge hooked up to that cylinder, so we'll be able to see the compression moving. Hopefully you guys can see that. No, you can't quite see that, can you? Let's see if we can get it so that you guys can see this compression gauge here. And the rockers. Hopefully the gauge stays there. I don't know if it will, but let's go ahead and crank this thing over and see what that rocker does. Okay, 10 times before it stopped moving. That's interesting. So now, if I crank it over again shortly after, I bet you it won't go more than once. Yep, one time and that's it. Okay. So, I need to revise that to at least 10 times of activating. These LT-based engines, maybe I'll have to create 2 different responses for this based on LT or LS. The LS, 5 to 7 times seems to work fine for the most part. Every once in a while I get one that takes a little longer. But for the most part, 5 to 7 seems to work. Maybe I'll tell them just do it 7 to 10 times. And then the LT-based, I'll say 7 to 10 times twice in a row. And give it a break in between for the starter to heat soak and cool down a little bit. Even though it really feels like this starter has way more torque than necessary. And I think it does by design, because these engines also have where you can sit at a stop sign, it'll shut off the engine, and then when the light turns green, it'll start it up and take off. And the reason it needs more torque for that is because you want this thing to crank over really quick to start rapidly. You don't want to sit there at the stop line after you hit the gas going, hello, 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 oh, there it goes. You know what I mean? So they set it up to start easier, quicker, by giving it a high torque starter. These things crank over so dang fast, I really don't think they're going to overheat very easily. It almost sounds like a low compression engine, but the thing's got phenomenal compression, like 240 psi on the compression gauge, which is mind-blowing to me, because usually I only see that on real high-performance applications. So there you have it. The diagnosis procedure for a spun lifter on one of these vehicles, or even the older generation, because I did talk about the electrical box being on the other side. But as I was saying with the compression, here's a good view of my gauge, because you can see how high that compression was really going to when you consider how far that needle was going. I know you couldn't see the actual numbers on the gauge. It was like whited out in the video. Stuff I can't anticipate when I'm actually making the video. I can only see it after I go to edit the video. So it is what it is. With that, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Check out more of my videos. I have lots and lots of videos on my channel. A lot of it's the older stuff. This is the newest one as far as the GMs go. I do have some Ford stuff too if you're a Ford guy. I have a on-3 turbo kit, all kinds of fun stuff. But most importantly, if you happen to have GM V8 with AFM, DFM, what have you, I have a website, crazedperformancerepair.com. And if you need any products for that vehicle, I have a lot of stuff available. Used, new, full delete kits, all kinds of good stuff on there. Be sure to check that website out, especially if you need any information. I have a forum. I also have a frequently asked questions page where I cover all kinds of awesome things in regards to these vehicles. So, check that out. I will see you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching. And as always, I'll see you on the next one. There are a lot more on this vehicle coming soon. I've been working tirelessly to get them done.